So when we're talking about variables and how to store information in our computer only understands certain things, and we're going to talk a lot more about that at a later time. But right now I want to talk about variables and how this pertains to variables. So you might remember using a block code like what you see on the screen here. If I said start painting and I put in a number like 5, what do you think would happen? Or if I said turn and I put in purple, what do you think would happen there? So there are certain data types that are expected to be used when you're talking about a variable. So variables are used to store information. But my computer also needs to know what kind of information or what type of data will I be storing. The types of data that we're going to be talking about first and foremost are strings. So strings is just a fancy word for saying a word or a phrase. Think of it like sometimes you take a string and you put like popcorn or beads or something and you string them all together so that it makes one big long necklace or whatever. This is a string of characters, and so that's a word or a phrase, something like that. And then there's several different number types of data types or types of variables. So there's something called an int, which is you intend for an integer to be stored in that variable. Integers are numbers that don't have a decimal after them. So whole numbers and their opposites. -5, for example, or 3, or 17, or 1,760,554. That's an integer. And we'll talk about integers and real numbers at a later time. But today I want to focus mostly on strings. When we start programming and having a conversation with our computer, we'll be using strings to store what we say, and we'll be using strings to get information out of the computer. But it's important to understand that computers don't see all data the same, and they need to be told what type of data they'll be storing. So for example, if you were going to store your name in a computer, what data type would that be? If you said string, that is the data type I would use to store my name. If you were going to store the number of people in a room, what data type would that be? Probably a number, an integer more specifically. If you're going to store the amount of money you have in a bank account, what type of data would that be? Okay, because it has decimals on it, that's a real number, so I would store that as a real number. In programming, we call that a double, but we'll talk more about those later. Just understand that there's different data types, and we'll have to let our computer know what type of data each variable that we want to use will be storing. So let's get started.